Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Ready to explore something kind of wild?
Always. What we got today?
Well, it's something we all use constantly, like every single day, but
Let me guess. Oxygen.
haha, close. But no, it's information itself.
Ah, no, that's getting deep.
Exactly. Not just like, facts and figures, but
What information is, how it shapes our thoughts, how it's changed over time, and
and how we can all handle the just massive amount of it we face, like constantly these days.
that's a big one. Feeling overwhelmed is pretty much a universal experience these days.
Right. So, to navigate this deep dive, we're using James Gleick's book, The Information, A History, a Theory, a Flood.
Great book. He takes us on this journey through how information has evolved.
From like ancient drum languages to the digital age.
And what's amazing is the challenges we face with information overload, they're not new.
Really?
Yep, even our ancestors had to figure out how to transmit messages accurately.
And like make sense of the wind around them.
Exactly.
So, okay, Gleick starts with this example of African drum languages, which
Oh, yeah.
blew my mind. You think of drums as just like simple signals, but
Right, like attack or retreat, but these were whole languages.
super complex. They could convey these incredibly detailed messages across huge distances.
Imagine, like, summoning villagers for a funeral, but it's not just, hey, someone died. The drums tell you the person's status.
And even like the appropriate level of mourning.
Powerful stuff.
Right. It makes you realize how creative people were back then when it came to communication.
It really highlights the core problem of information. You have to select a specific message and transmit it accurately.
And even with clever tricks like adding extra beats for context.
There was always this chance for ambiguity,
Totally. But as information tech evolved, so did how it shaped us. One wild idea Gleick explores is,
Let me guess, that writing didn't just change how we recorded info, it changed how we think.
yes, mind-blowing, right?
Totally. He mentioned studies where people who couldn't read, they really struggled to even describe a tree.
A tree?
Yeah, like categorize it, talk about its parts. It's like writing-enabled abstract thought, logic.
Stuff we take for granted now.
Exactly.
So it's like writing unlocked this new part of our brains, and we see this evolution keep going with the telegraph.
Oh, huge shift.
Before that, news traveled at like the speed of horseback.
Yeah.
Weather was this local mystery. Can you imagine?
It's crazy to think how limited our view of the world was.
Yeah.
The telegraph didn't just speed up communication.
It revealed all these hidden connections.
Suddenly we could see weather patterns spanned continents, which led to...
Entirely new fields of science.
Exactly.
And it changed how we thought about time and distance. Gleick tells this almost funny story about a criminal who,
Who tried to outrun a telegraph message.
yes, he poisons his mistress, tries to escape by train,
But the telegraph message, with his description, it beat him to the next station.
caught because information traveled faster than he could.
Amazing example of how even early tech had this huge impact on society.
Right. And this brings us to a total game changer in how we understand information. Claude Shannon.
Oh, information theory.
In 1948, he did something nobody had done before. He defined and measured information.
Revolutionary. He brought in this idea of entropy, which is basically disorder, randomness.
Wait, so more random equals more information? That's kind of backwards.
I know, right? But think of it like this. The more unpredictable something is.
The more surprised you are by it.
Exactly. Which means you learn something new, a predictable event, you're like, meh, seen it. This led to the bit becoming the basic unit of information.
So one bit is like the smallest possible surprise.
Pretty much. And that paved the way for everything digital we have today.
Wow. So we've gone from drums to bits. But Gleick doesn't stop there. He tackles this huge issue of information overload.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
He uses the Tower of Babel as a metaphor. More information isn't always better.
Perfect metaphor.
Yeah.
The tower, all those different languages, nobody understanding each other.
Leading to chaos, miscommunication.
Even with access to info, shared understanding is key.
And Gleick connects this to, get this, Wikipedia.
Seriously.
He says even the Wikipedia entry for Babel, it has all these meanings.
Some of which contradict each other, or are just plain wrong.
It's this paradox. We have more info than ever, but making sense of it is harder than ever.
It makes you realize raw information by itself, it doesn't mean anything.
It only becomes knowledge when we process it, connect it to what we already know.
And think critically about it.
So are we like living in our own digital Tower of Babel?
In a way, yeah. What does that mean for all of us trying to keep up with this constant flood?
Right. It feels impossible sometimes.
It means filtering and critical thinking are like essential survival skills now.
We gotta sift through the noise, figure out what's relevant.
And figure out if it's even true in the first place.
So much harder now with all the misinformation out there.
Exactly. And that's where Gleick's point about information not having an inherent meaning is so important.
It's up to us to make the meaning, to connect the dots.
And create knowledge from all this data that's hitting us constantly.
So it's not about passively absorbing stuff.
It's about actively engaging, asking questions, challenging ideas.
And constantly trying to understand things better.
Exactly.
This deep dive is as much about understanding ourselves.
How we learn, how we think, how we make sense of the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By understanding our own thinking, we can navigate this information landscape way better.
We'd go from feeling overwhelmed to feeling empowered.
That's a much better feeling.
Right. So instead of feeling defeated by this flood, we can actually use it to learn and grow.
I love that. But that brings us back to your point before. If information reduces uncertainty.
What does that mean for the role of questions themselves?
Whoa, deep.
Are we so busy looking for answers that we forget to ask the right questions?
It's true. We have instant access to so much, it's tempting to just grab the first answer that pops up. But maybe
The real value is in the questions, in being curious.
in that pursuit of understanding that goes deeper than simple answers.
You got it. Questions are what drive us forward, spark our curiosity, lead to new discoveries.
So if we're feeling overwhelmed, maybe we need to just step back and ask, what am I really trying to figure out?
What am I curious about? What do we actually want to learn more about?
Great questions. And in this age of information overload, our curiosity,
And that desire to learn.
those are still our most valuable tools.
Couldn't agree more.
This has been such a fascinating discussion. It's seriously changed how I think about information.
Me too. And this journey isn't over yet. There's so much more to explore.
That's right. Before we wrap up our deep dive for today,
We should take some time to
reflect on what we've learned so far.
and think about how we can use these ideas in our own lives.
Okay, so we've talked about how information has, evolved over time, but now I'm curious, how do we deal with this constant flood of info we all face? I mean, it's overwhelming.
It really is. And Gleick actually gets into this directly in the book. He talks about the Library of Babel.
The library of what?
Babel. It's from a short story by Jorge Luis Borges. This library, it contains every single possible book.
Every book.
Yeah, like every combination of letters and words.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
It's kind of mind-blowing and also kind of terrifying.
I can see it. Having access to all information, that'd be amazing, but also,
Totally paralyzing.
yeah, it'd be like trying to find a needle in an infinite haystack.
Exactly. And that's the perfect analogy for, the digital age. Think about how much information is online. Wikipedia, social media, databases, news articles.
And videos, forums, everything.
And every minute, more is added. It's like a modern-day Library of Babel.
And it's so easy to feel lost in it.
Absolutely.
I know I do sometimes. It's like you're always trying to catch up, but the information, it just keeps coming faster.
Gleick calls this information anxiety, which I think is a perfect way to describe it.
It's a very real thing.
It is. And it's something we all experience to some degree. But Gleick also offers us some hope, right? He talks about how important it is to filter and search, to develop strategies for dealing with this influx.
So it's not about trying to read and watch and listen to everything.
No.
It's about being more intentional with what we let into our lives.
Exactly. Think of it like curating your own information diet. You wouldn't eat every single food you came across.
Right.
You choose foods that nourish you.
That support your well-being.
Right. It's the same with information. We need to be pickier.
More discerning about what we consume.
Yeah, like become information gourmets.
That's so a good analogy. So how do we do that? How do we become more discerning information consumers?
It all boils down to critical thinking. You have to be able to evaluate your sources, decide how credible the information is, and recognize bias.
So it's about being, more skeptical.
Yeah, like become an information detective.
I love that. Questioning everything, looking for clues, figuring out
What's reliable, what's not.
Like you said, we can't just blindly accept everything we read or hear, especially with all the
Social media, yeah.
and online echo chambers and stuff.
It's like we almost need a healthy distrust of information, at least at first. We can't assume something is true just because it's presented to us.
We have to question it.
Exactly. We need to develop this critical lens, right? And this is where Gleick's point about information not having inherent meaning becomes really important.
Oh, right. It's on US to figure out what it means.
To connect the dots and create knowledge from this raw data.
So it's not passive.
No, it's active.
It's about engaging with the information.
Asking questions, challenging ideas.
We're constantly trying to reach a deeper level of understanding.
That's it.
So this deep dive, it's not just diasis about understanding information. It's about understanding ourselves.
How we learn, how we think, how we make sense of the world.
Totally. And if we understand how our own thinking works, we can handle all this information so much better.
It's about taking control, right?
Yeah.
We go from feeling overwhelmed and anxious to feeling empowered.
Empowered is definitely better. So instead of feeling defeated by all this information,
We can actually use it as a chance to grow and learn.
I love that. But that brings us back to your earlier question. If information is about reducing uncertainty,
What does that mean for questions themselves?
are we so busy focusing on answers that we forget to ask the right questions to begin with?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It's so easy to just, Google something and grab the first answer, but
Then maybe the real magic is in the questions themselves, in that curiosity.
in wanting to understand things on a deeper level beyond just simple answers.
You got it. Questions are what push us forward. They spark our curiosity, lead to new discoveries.
So if we're feeling overwhelmed by all this information, maybe the best thing to do is just pause and ask,
What am I really trying to figure out here?
what am I truly curious about? What do I actually want to learn more about?
Great questions. And in this world of constant information overload, that curiosity of ours,
And our desire to learn.
those are still our most valuable tools.
I totally agree. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's really changed how I think about information.
Me too. And, this exploration, it's not over. There's so much more to uncover.
That's true. Before we wrap up this deep dive today, let's take a minute to,
Reflect on some of the key ideas we've talked about.
and think about how we can use these insights in our own lives. It's funny how we started with, drums and telegraphs.
Right.
But we've ended up talking about something way bigger.
It really shows how the story of information is a story about us,
Yeah.
about humans, our creativity.
Our desire to understand the world, to connect with each other.
Exactly. And every time we make a tech leap from writing to the internet,
It's like we expand our ability to share information.
to build relationships.
It's this constant push to break down barriers, connect the world.
But as we've seen, that connection comes with, its own set of challenges.
We got to be careful about overload, not lose sight of what really matters.
Totally.
That's why Gleick's point about meaning making is so important. It's not enough to just passively take in information.
We have to do on something with it.
We have to engage with it, think critically, even get creative with it.
Turn data into knowledge.
And then knowledge into wisdom, insight.
And big goal.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave everyone with a challenge. Don't just be a consumer of information.
Be more than that.
Be a creator, a curator, a critical thinker.
Someone who uses information to make the world a better place.
More meaningful, more connected.
Because the future of information, it really is in our hands.
We decide what stories get told, what knowledge we value.
And ultimately, what kind of world we build.
Maybe someday someone will look back at us
3-hour time.
and be amazed at how we used information.
To solve problems, connect people, create a better future.
That's a future worth working towards. And I think that by understanding information better, by using those critical thinking skills we talked about,
We can all help make that future a reality.
absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of information. Until next time, keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
Keep searching for the signal in all the noise.
And remember, the best kind of information is the kind that makes you ask even more questions.